I never thought a pile of snow would cost me $200,000. But here we are, sitting in my lawyer's office while he explains how a vindictive HOA president just destroyed her own community's infrastructure. My name is Gregory Keller, and I've lived in the Pinewood Estates development outside Boulder, Colorado, for 8 years. It's one of those fancy mountain communities where every house sits on at least 2 acres, surrounded by ponderosa pines and spectacular views of the Rockies. When my wife Sarah and I bought our property back in 2018, we fell in love with the privacy and the natural beauty. What we didn't realize was that we'd accidentally positioned ourselves at the center of a network of private access roads that I'd eventually end up maintaining for the entire community. The development has 43 homes total, spread across a sprawling hillside property. The main entrance connects to Highway 72, but about half the residents, including myself, access our properties through a series of interconnected private roads that wind through the eastern section. When we bought the place, the previous owner, an old rancher named Bill, casually mentioned that he'd been grading and maintaining these roads for years because he had all the equipment anyway. I'm a landscape contractor by trade, running my own business with a crew of 12 employees. We do everything from basic lawn care to major hardscaping projects, and yes, we handle snow removal for commercial clients all winter long. So when Bill offered to sell me his old road grader, a backhoe, and his ancient but functional snowplow truck for a reasonable price, I jumped at it. The equipment was already stored in a large shed on what would become my property, and it seemed like a natural fit. For the first 7 years, everything was perfect. I'd grade the roads twice a year, fill in potholes when they appeared, and plow snow after every significant storm. The private roads connected about 20 homes total, including mine, and it just made sense to keep them maintained. None of this was required by the HOA covenants. These roads were genuinely private, running through easements across my property and 2 others. But I had the equipment, the know-how, and honestly, I needed the roads in good shape for my own access anyway. The HOA itself was relatively quiet during those years. We had a reasonable board that met quarterly, approved or denied the occasional fence design, and mostly left everyone alone. Our dues were modest at $120 a month, covering the entrance landscaping, the community well system, and basic administrative costs. The president was a retired engineer named Tom who ran meetings efficiently and never bothered anyone unless they painted their house neon pink or something equally outrageous. Then Tom and his wife moved to Arizona in January of last year, and everything went straight to hell. Patricia Henshaw took over as HOA president in March of 2025. She'd been on the board for about 2 years, always sitting quietly in the corner during meetings, occasionally nodding along to whatever Tom suggested. She lived in one of the showcase homes near the main entrance, a massive 6,000-square-foot log mansion that her late husband had built before he passed away from a heart attack 3 years ago. She was 52, recently retired from some middle management position at a pharmaceutical company, and apparently had decided that running the HOA would give her life purpose. Her first act as president was to schedule a special meeting to address community standards. I should have known right then what was coming. The meeting took place on a Thursday evening in late March at the community center, which was really just a glorified shed with some tables and chairs near the entrance gate. About 15 homeowners showed up, which was actually a good turnout for us. Patricia stood at the front, wearing a pressed pantsuit that seemed absurdly formal for a neighborhood meeting, her blonde hair styled in that aggressive bob that somehow screams, I want to speak to your manager. Thank you all for coming, she began, her voice sharp and nasal. I've been reviewing our community covenants and HOA rules, and I'm frankly shocked at how lax enforcement has been. We live in a premier mountain community, and our property values depend on maintaining certain standards. I exchanged glances with my neighbor, Frank Morrison, who lived 3 houses down from me. He rolled his eyes slightly. We both sensed where this was going. Patricia continued, clicking through a PowerPoint presentation she'd apparently spent hours preparing. I've identified several areas of concern. Unapproved exterior paint colors, sheds that don't match primary residence colors, vehicles parked in driveways instead of garages, and most significantly, improper snow removal techniques that violate our aesthetic guidelines. That last one made my ears perk up. "Excuse me, Patricia," I said, raising my hand. "What do you mean by improper snow removal techniques?" She fixed me with a cold stare. "Mr. Keller, I've noticed that you've been piling snow in large mounds along the private access roads. It's unsightly and creates visual clutter that detracts from our mountain aesthetic." I blinked, genuinely confused. "I'm plowing roads after snowstorms. Where exactly would you like me to put the snow?" "That's not really the HOA's concern," she said primly. "What is our concern is that these large snow piles remain visible from various properties and create an unkempt appearance. According to Section 7, Paragraph 4 of our covenants, all homeowners must maintain their properties in a manner consistent with the natural mountain environment." "Patricia, I'm plowing roads, not decorating them," I said, trying to keep my tone reasonable. "Snow has to go somewhere. I push it to the sides just like every snow removal service in Colorado does." "Perhaps you should consider hauling it away," she suggested, as if this was the most reasonable thing in the world. Frank actually laughed out loud. "Haul away snow? Do you have any idea how much snow we get up here? We're talking feet of accumulation over the winter. That would cost thousands of dollars per storm." Patricia's lips pressed into a thin line. "Then perhaps the snow removal techniques need to be refined. All I'm saying is that the current method violates our community standards. Consider this your warning, Mr. Keller." The meeting continued with more petty complaints about shed colors and visible trash cans, but I was too annoyed to pay much attention. After it wrapped up, several neighbors approached me privately to say they thought Patricia was being ridiculous. A few even offered to chip in money if she actually tried to fine me, which I appreciated but honestly found absurd. I was maintaining roads as a favor to everyone, using my own equipment, my own fuel, and my own time. Winter had been relatively light that year, and spring came early. I didn't think much more about Patricia's snow complaints as I focused on my business. Spring is busy season for landscapers in Colorado, and we were booked solid with cleanup jobs and new installations. Then, October arrived, and with it, the first major snowstorm of the 2025-2026 winter season. It was a big one, too. The Weather Service had been tracking it for days, a massive system sweeping down from Canada that promised to dump 2 to 3 feet across the Front Range. My phone started ringing on Wednesday afternoon, 2 days before the storm was set to hit, with commercial clients confirming their snow removal contracts and requesting priority service. The snow started falling Friday evening, thick and heavy, the kind of wet, dense snow that's perfect for building snowmen but hell on your back when you're shoveling. By Saturday morning, we had 18 inches on the ground and it was still coming down hard. I spent the entire day with my crew, hitting our commercial accounts first since those paid the bills. Shopping centers, office parks, a couple of medical facilities that needed clear access for emergencies. Sunday morning dawned clear and cold, with a brilliant blue sky and nearly 3 feet of fresh powder blanketing everything. It was gorgeous, the kind of day that makes you remember why you live in Colorado despite the winters. I fired up my plow truck around 8 a.m. and headed out to clear the private access roads. The work took about 4 hours. The roads twisted through the pine forests, connecting various properties, and I had my routine down to a science after years of doing this. I'd start at the far eastern end where the pavement connected to Highway 72, then work my way back toward my house, plowing in a pattern that pushed snow to the sides and left clean, navigable roads behind me. The snow piles along the edges were substantial after this storm, some of them 4 or 5 feet high where I'd made multiple passes, but that was completely normal and unavoidable. I finished up around noon, satisfied with a job well done, and headed home to take a hot shower and make some lunch. Several neighbors texted me throughout the afternoon thanking me for plowing. Frank sent a case of beer to my house with his teenage son. Everything was fine. Monday morning, I found an official HOA violation notice taped to my front door. The letter was printed on fancy letterhead that Patricia had apparently designed, complete with a logo featuring pine trees and mountains. The text was formal and officious, clearly trying to sound legal and intimidating. Dear Mr. Keller, this letter serves as official notice that you are in violation of Pinewood Estates HOA covenants, Section 7, Paragraph 4 regarding property maintenance and aesthetic standards. On November 3, 2025, you engaged in snow removal activities that resulted in large, unsightly accumulations of snow along private roadways visible from multiple properties. This violates our community standards for maintaining the natural mountain aesthetic. You are hereby fined $500. Payment must be received within 30 days. Future violations will result in escalating fines. Sincerely, Patricia Henshaw, HOA President. I read the letter 3 times, my blood pressure rising with each pass. This was insane. I just spent 4 hours of my Sunday plowing roads that benefited 20 households, using my own equipment and fuel, and now I was being fined for the privilege. I immediately called Patricia. She answered on the 3rd ring, her voice syrupy sweet. Gregory, I assume you're calling about the violation notice. Patricia, this is ridiculous, I said, forcing myself to stay calm. I plowed snow. Snow has to go somewhere. What exactly did you expect me to do? As I explained at the meeting, the current method creates visual pollution, she said. Perhaps you could spread the snow out more or create smaller piles or explore other options. Other options? Like what? Melting it with a flamethrower. Patricia, I've been plowing these roads for 7 years. No one has ever complained before. Well, I'm complaining now, she said, her voice hardening. I'm the HOA president and it's my job to enforce our covenants. The fine stands. If you continue using this method, the fines will increase. Those roads aren't even HOA property, I protested. They're private roads on easements. The HOA has no jurisdiction. The snow piles are visible from HOA properties, which makes them our concern, she countered. Pay the fine, Gregory, or don't, and we'll put a lien on your property. Your choice. She hung up. I stood in my kitchen, staring at my phone in disbelief. This couldn't be legal. I pulled out the HOA covenants, a thick document I'd barely glanced at in 7 years, and started reading. Section 7. Paragraph 4 did indeed reference maintaining properties consistent with the mountain environment, but it was vague and clearly intended to prevent people from painting houses bright colors or installing tacky decorations. Nowhere did it mention snow removal or specify what consistent with the mountain environment actually meant. I called my buddy Derek, who's a real estate attorney in Denver. After explaining the situation, he was quiet for a moment before responding. "Technically, she can fine you if the board votes to support it," he said carefully. "HOAs have broad authority to enforce their covenants, even if the interpretations are questionable. The real question is whether the covenant actually applies to what you're doing." I'd argue it doesn't, but that would mean fighting it, probably in court, which gets expensive fast. "So what are my options?" I asked. "Pay the fine and stop plowing, fight it legally, or find some kind of compromise," Derek said. "But Greg, here's the thing. If those roads aren't HOA property, you're under no obligation to maintain them at all. You've been doing this as a favor, right?" That stopped me cold. He was absolutely right. I'd been maintaining these roads out of necessity and neighborly goodness, but there was no legal requirement for me to do so. The roads existed on easements, providing access to various properties, but there was no formal maintenance agreement, no shared expense arrangement, nothing. "So I could just stop," I said slowly. "You could absolutely stop," Derek confirmed. "If she's going to fine you for how you're doing it and there's no legal obligation to do it at all, then yeah, you could just stop. Let the HOA figure it out." "But that screws over my neighbors," I protested. "Frank, the Johnsons, the Martinez family, all the people who live back here." "That's Patricia's problem, not yours," Derek said. "Look, I'm not saying be vindictive. I'm saying you need to think strategically. You're providing a valuable service for free and you're being punished for it. That's not sustainable." I thanked Derek and spent the rest of the day thinking about my options. Part of me wanted to fight out of pure principle, but Derek was right about the costs. Even if I won, I'd spend thousands in legal fees proving that an HOA president was being unreasonable, which everyone already knew. The more I thought about it, the more another option made sense. If Patricia wanted to micromanage snow removal, she could handle arranging it herself. I'd stop maintaining the roads entirely, not out of spite, but out of simple practicality. Why would I continue doing something I was being punished for? That evening, I drafted a letter to the HOA board. I kept it professional and factual. "Dear Pinewood Estates HOA Board, I am writing in response to the violation notice received on November 4th, 2025, regarding my snow removal methods on the private access roads in the eastern section of our community. After reviewing the HOA covenants and consulting with legal counsel, I have concluded that these private roads fall outside of HOA jurisdiction, and I have been maintaining them voluntarily for the past 7 years as a service to my neighbors and to ensure my own access. Given that the HOA has now determined that my maintenance methods violate community standards, I will no longer be maintaining these roads in any capacity, effective immediately. This includes snow plowing, grading, pothole repair, and all other maintenance activities I have previously provided at no cost to the community. The affected residents will need to make alternative arrangements for road maintenance going forward. As these are private roads on easements, I recommend the affected homeowners form a road maintenance association or contract with a professional service. I am happy to provide contact information for commercial services if needed. I will be paying the $500 fine under protest to avoid further conflict, but I want to be clear that I dispute the HOA's authority to regulate maintenance activities on private roads outside your jurisdiction. Sincerely, Gregory Keller. I copied all 5 board members, including Patricia, and sent it via certified mail on Tuesday morning. Then, I wrote a separate, more personal email to the 19 other households affected by the private roads, explaining the situation. "Hi everyone. I wanted to give you a heads up about a situation with the HOA. After last weekend's storm, I received a violation notice and $500 fine from Patricia for how I plowed the snow on our private access roads. After consulting with an attorney, I've been advised that since these roads are not HOA property, and I have no legal obligation to maintain them, the smart move is to simply stop providing this service. I know this is frustrating, and I'm sorry to put everyone in this position. I've genuinely enjoyed helping keep our roads clear and maintained over the years, but I can't continue doing this work for free while being fined for my efforts. We'll need to figure out an alternative solution. I'm happy to discuss options, whether that's forming a road association where we all chip in for professional services or some other arrangement. Let me know your thoughts. Best, Greg." The responses came fast and furious. Most people were sympathetic and angry at Patricia. Frank called me directly. "This is bullshit, Greg," he said, his voice tight with frustration. "Patricia is out of control. Half of us can't even get to our houses without those roads." "I know, and I'm sorry," I said, "but I can't keep doing this if I'm going to be punished for it." "No, you're absolutely right," Frank said quickly. "I'm not mad at you, I'm mad at Patricia. What can we do, realistically? We need to either hire a professional service and split the cost, or we need to pressure the HOA board to override Patricia and acknowledge that I was doing everyone a favor," I said. "I'm calling an emergency meeting," Frank declared. "She can't just screw over 20 households because she doesn't like how snow piles look." The emergency meeting happened on Thursday evening, just 3 days after I sent my letter. The community center was packed with at least 30 homeowners, the most I'd ever seen at an HOA meeting. People were pissed. Patricia stood at the front, her expression set in stubborn lines, clearly prepared for a fight. The other 4 board members sat at the table with her, looking uncomfortable. I recognized Carol, a retired teacher, and Doug, who worked in IT. The other 2 were newer residents I didn't know well. Frank didn't wait for Patricia to start the meeting. He stood up immediately and addressed the room. "We're here because Patricia fined Greg Keller for plowing the private access roads that half of us depend on to reach our homes," he said loudly. "Greg has been maintaining these roads for free, using his own equipment and time for 7 years. And now he's stopping because Patricia decided snow piles are ugly. I think we all know who the problem is here." Several people applauded. Patricia's face turned red. "Frank, you're out of order," she snapped. "I'm running this meeting." "Then run it," Frank shot back. "Explain to everyone why you fined the one person who's been keeping our roads passable." Patricia took a deep breath, clearly trying to regain control. "The fine was issued because Mr. Keller's snow removal methods violate our community aesthetic standards. Large snow piles are unsightly and inconsistent with the natural mountain environment we're trying to preserve." "It's snow, Patricia," someone called from the back. "It melts in April," someone else added to laughter. "The covenants are clear," Patricia said, her voice rising. Section 7, Paragraph 4 gives the HOA authority to regulate property aesthetics. Mr. Keller was in violation. Carol, the retired teacher on the board, raised her hand tentatively. "Patricia, I have to say, I think this is being interpreted too broadly. That section was meant to prevent permanent eyesores, not regulate snow removal." "I disagree," Patricia said flatly. "And as president, I have the authority to enforce the covenants as I see fit." Doug, the IT guy, shook his head. "Actually, enforcement decisions are supposed to be made by the board as a whole, not unilaterally by the president. I never voted on this fine." Patricia glared at him. "It was an obvious violation. I didn't think a vote was necessary. Well, I'm calling for a vote now, Doug said. I move that we rescind the fine against Gregory Keller and formally acknowledge that his road maintenance activities are appreciated and not subject to HOA aesthetic regulations. I second that, Carol said immediately. Patricia looked like she wanted to explode. This sets a terrible precedent. If we let people ignore the covenants whenever it's convenient, we might as well not have rules at all. He's not ignoring anything, Frank said. He's maintaining private roads that aren't even HOA property. You're the one overstepping. The vote was called. Doug, Carol, and the other 2 board members voted to rescind the fine. Patricia was the only vote against. The motion passed 4-1. I felt a wave of relief, but it was short-lived. Patricia stood up abruptly, her chair scraping loudly against the floor. "Fine," she said, her voice icy. "The fine is rescinded. But let me be clear, Mr. Keller. If you continue using your current snow removal methods, I will find other covenant violations to enforce. Believe me, I will make your life miserable." The room went silent. Even for Patricia, this was shockingly petty and vindictive. "Are you seriously threatening a homeowner for maintaining roads?" Frank said, his voice dangerous. In front of 30 witnesses, Patricia grabbed her papers and purse. "This meeting is adjourned," she announced and walked out. The community center erupted in angry conversation. Several people came over to apologize to me, as if Patricia's behavior was somehow their fault. Doug and Carol both looked mortified. "Greg, I'm so sorry," Carol said. "I don't know what's gotten into her. She's been difficult since taking over, but this is extreme." "It's not your fault," I assured her. "Look, the fine is rescinded, which is good, but here's the thing. I meant what I said in my letter. I'm not going to keep maintaining those roads if Patricia is going to harass me about it. It's not worth the stress." "But what are we supposed to do?" Ask Jennifer Martinez, who lived about a mile back on the private road system with her husband and 3 kids. "We can't get out without those roads being plowed." "You'll need to hire a service," I said. "I can give you some names. If everyone chips in, it won't be that expensive per household." "How much are we talking?" someone asked. I did some quick mental math. For plowing after major storms, probably around $200 per household per season if you split it 20 ways. More if you want regular grading and maintenance. People grumbled, but it was manageable. What nobody said out loud was the obvious question. Why should they pay for something they'd been getting for free for 7 years? I went home that night feeling unsettled. The fine was rescinded, but Patricia's threat hung in the air. She clearly had it out for me now, and I didn't trust her not to follow through. Sure enough, 2 weeks later, I received another violation notice. This one cited me for having a commercial vehicle visible from the street, specifically my landscape company truck that I parked in my driveway. The covenant section referenced prohibited commercial activity on residential properties. I called Derek again. "Is she serious?" I asked after reading him the violation. "Unfortunately, a lot of HOAs do have restrictions on commercial vehicles," Derek said. "What does your covenant actually say?" I read him the relevant section. It prohibited running commercial businesses from residential properties, with specific mentions of customer traffic, signage, and inventory storage. But it doesn't mention vehicles specifically, Derek noted. "And you're not running your business from your house, right? You have an office elsewhere, correct? I have a commercial property in Boulder where we keep most of the equipment and run operations. I just park my truck at home because, you know, I live here." "Then she's stretching again," Derek said. "But Greg, here's the reality. She's going to keep doing this. Every time she sees something even remotely questionable, she'll issue a violation. You can fight each one, but it'll be death by 1,000 cuts. So what do I do, honestly?" Either move, which is extreme, or call her bluff and force her to take legal action. If she puts a lien on your property over this stuff, you can challenge it in court, but that's expensive and time-consuming. I was starting to understand why people hated HOAs. I decided to park my truck at the office and drive my personal vehicle home each night. It was inconvenient, adding 20 minutes to my commute, but I didn't want to give Patricia any ammunition. November rolled into December, and Colorado settled into serious winter. We got hammered with storms, one after another, each dumping a foot or more of heavy snow. My crew worked around the clock keeping our commercial accounts clear. The private access roads in Pinewood Estates, meanwhile, became impassable. I watched from my property as neighbors tried to navigate the deteriorating conditions. After the first storm in mid-December, people managed with four-wheel drive and careful driving. After the second storm, Frank organized some neighbors to shovel and plow manually, but they didn't have proper equipment. The roads were barely passable. After the third storm, right before Christmas, the roads became genuinely dangerous. I was plowing my own long driveway when Frank pulled up in his truck, struggling through 2 feet of unplowed snow on the access road just to reach my house. "Greg, we need help," he said, getting out of his truck. He looked exhausted. "The Martinez family got stuck yesterday trying to get to a doctor's appointment. Jim Anderson's wife is 8 months pregnant, and they're terrified about not being able to get out in an emergency. This isn't sustainable." "Did you get quotes from commercial services like I suggested?" I asked. "Yes, and they're all either booked solid for the season or want exorbitant prices because we're so far from town," Frank said. "One company wanted $600 per household per season, and that's just for plowing after storms over 6 inches. No grading, no repairs, nothing else." I grimaced. That was steep, but not surprising. We were pretty remote, and companies charge premium rates for mountain access roads. "What do you want me to do, Frank?" I asked. "I feel terrible about this, but I can't keep fighting with Patricia." "Forget Patricia," Frank said urgently. "What if we form an actual road association, legal and formal? We draw up contracts, everyone pays you directly for services, and it's completely separate from the HOA. Patricia can't say anything because it's a private business arrangement." I considered this. It actually made sense. "How many households are we talking about?" 19, not counting you," Frank said. "I've already talked to everyone. We're all willing to pay. We just need someone with equipment and knowledge, and that's you." "What are people thinking in terms of cost?" "We figured $300 per household for the season," Frank said. "That's $5,700 total. Is that workable?" I did the math. Fuel, equipment maintenance, my time. $300 per household was actually pretty reasonable. I'd basically be breaking even, maybe making a tiny profit, but mostly just covering my costs. "I'd need a formal contract," I said, "and everyone has to sign up. I'm not maintaining roads for people who don't pay." "Absolutely," Frank agreed immediately. "I'll organize it. Just tell me what you need." I called Derek again to have him draft a simple road maintenance agreement. It specified exactly what services I'd provide: plowing after storms over 6 inches, grading twice annually, basic pothole repairs, and outlined payment terms and liability waivers. By January 2nd, all 19 households had signed contracts and paid their fees. I fired up my plow truck on January 4th after another massive storm dumped 18 inches overnight. It felt good to be back out there, clearing roads, making things passable. Several neighbors waved and thanked me as I worked. Patricia, naturally, lost her mind. I received a certified letter on January 7th, this one even more aggressive than the previous violations. "Mr. Keller, It has come to our attention that you are operating a commercial snow removal business from your residential property, in direct violation of Pinewood Estates Covenants Section 9, Paragraph 2. This is absolutely prohibited and must cease immediately. You are fined $1,000 and ordered to stop all commercial activities. Additionally, you are creating ongoing aesthetic violations with your snow removal methods. Another $1,000 fine is assessed for this violation. Total fines owed, $2,000. Payment is due within 30 days or a lien will be placed on your property. I called Derek the second I finished reading. She's completely out of control, I said, my voice shaking with anger. I'm not running a business from my property. The roads aren't HOA property. She has no jurisdiction over any of this. You're right, Derek said calmly, and this is actually good news. How is this possibly good news? Because she's overstepping so egregiously that you have grounds to fight back, Derek explained. She's harassing you, issuing baseless fines and abusing her authority. We can challenge this, and we can probably get her removed from the board in the process. That sounds expensive, I said. It will be, Derek admitted. But Greg, she's threatening to put a lien on your property over completely bogus claims. You need to fight this, and honestly, I think we can win pretty easily. I talked it over with Sarah that evening. She'd been watching this whole situation escalate with increasing frustration. I'm so tired of this, she said. We bought this house to have peace and privacy, and instead we're dealing with a crazy HOA president who has it out for you. I know, I said, but if we fight this legally, it's going to cost thousands of dollars, maybe tens of thousands if it drags out. And if we don't fight it, she'll just keep harassing us until we leave, Sarah pointed out. We can't live like this, Greg. We need to end it. She was right. I called Derek the next morning and told him to proceed with legal action. Derek filed a lawsuit in Boulder County District Court on January 12, 2026. The complaint was thorough and damning. It alleged harassment, abuse of authority, improper fines, and exceeded jurisdiction. We named Patricia individually as well as the HOA board, though Derek was careful to note that the other board members had actually voted against Patricia's actions. We also filed for an emergency injunction to prevent the HOA from placing a lien on my property pending resolution of the case. The legal papers were served on January 15th. Patricia called me that evening, absolutely screaming into the phone. "How dare you sue the HOA?" she shrieked. "This is our community. You can't just attack us like this." "Patricia, you've been harassing me for months," I said, keeping my voice steady. "You've issued baseless fines, threatened my property, and abused your authority. I'm not going to tolerate it anymore." "I am enforcing our covenants," she yelled. "That's my job as president." "You're not enforcing covenants," I said. "You're targeting me specifically because you don't like that I stood up to you, and now a judge is going to decide who's right." She made a strangled sound of rage and hung up. The next few weeks were tense. Patricia apparently hired an attorney, some guy from Denver who specialized in HOA disputes. The HOA board, meanwhile, distanced themselves from Patricia pretty quickly. Doug and Carol both sent me private emails saying they supported my case and disagreed with Patricia's actions. The emergency injunction hearing happened on January 28th. Derek presented our case cleanly and efficiently. He showed the timeline of Patricia's escalating harassment, the other board members' votes against her fines, and the clear overreach of HOA authority into matters beyond their jurisdiction. Patricia's attorney argued that the HOA had broad authority to enforce covenants, and that my actions violated community standards. But he couldn't explain why the rest of the board had voted against Patricia's enforcement actions. which seriously undermined her position. Judge Catherine Morrison granted the injunction, preventing any liens pending trial. She also made some pointed comments about HOA boards needing to act reasonably and within their actual authority, which Derek said was a very good sign for our case. February brought more snow and more tension. I continued maintaining the roads under my contracts with the other homeowners. Patricia continued glaring at me whenever our paths crossed, which thankfully wasn't often. Then in mid-February, things took a bizarre turn. Frank called me on a Wednesday afternoon, his voice urgent. "Greg, you need to see this. Come to the community center entrance." I drove over, curious and concerned. Frank met me at the gate, along with several other neighbors. He pointed to a newly installed sign. "Private road, no trespassing, authorized vehicles, only violators will be prosecuted." "She put this up last night," Frank said. "And get this, she sent an email to everyone this morning saying that the access roads are now under HOA control and only residents who are current on their dues can use them." I stared at the sign, then at Frank. "She can't do that. Those roads aren't HOA property." "I know that, you know that, but she did it anyway," Frank said. "And there's more." He pulled out his phone and showed me the email. It was long and rambling, but the key part was Patricia declaring that the HOA was taking control of access road maintenance and security, and that any unauthorized use would be prosecuted as trespassing. "This is insane," I said. "Those roads cross easements on my property and two others. She has absolutely no authority to control access." "There's something else," Frank said, looking uncomfortable. "She hired a private security company. They've been patrolling the roads and apparently taking photos of anyone who drives through." This was escalating into genuinely unhinged territory. I immediately forwarded the email to Derek. His response was quick and alarmed. "This is really bad. She's now making false claims of authority over property she doesn't control. This could actually be criminal. Document everything." Over the next week, Patricia's behavior got worse. The security company, some outfit called Mountain Patrol Services, stationed a guard at the entrance to the private roads. They stopped residents and demanded to see proof of HOA membership and dues payment. Several people called me, furious and confused. Jennifer Martinez was in tears when she called, saying the guard had blocked her from leaving her own house for 20 minutes while he verified her status. I decided to test the situation myself. On February 20th, I drove my truck toward the access roads. Sure enough, a guard in a cheap uniform stepped out and held up his hand. I rolled down my window. "Can I help you?" "This is private HOA property, sir," the guard said, reading from what was clearly a script. "I need to see proof of residency and current HOA membership." "These roads aren't HOA property," I said calmly. "They're private roads on easements. I live here and I have every right to use them." "Madam Henshaw says differently," the guard said. "I can't let you through without authorization." "Madam Henshaw is wrong," I said. "And you're actually blocking my legal right of access. I suggest you move." The guard looked uncertain. "I'm just doing my job, sir." "I understand that, but your employer is breaking the law," I said. "I'm going to drive through now. If you try to stop me, I'll call the police and report you for false imprisonment." I started rolling forward slowly. The guard stepped aside, looking relieved to avoid confrontation. I drove through and immediately called Derek. "She's hired security to block access to private roads that aren't HOA property," I explained. "This has to be illegal." "It absolutely is," Derek said. "This is false imprisonment and possibly extortion if she's trying to force dues payments. Greg, I think we need to involve the police." "Really?" "Yes. What she's doing isn't just an HOA dispute anymore. She's restricting people's freedom of movement and making false claims of authority. That's criminal. I called the Boulder County Sheriff's Department and filed a report. A deputy came out that afternoon and took statements from me, Frank, Jennifer Martinez, and several other residents. He took photos of the signs and the security guard setup. "Madam, this is concerning," Deputy Wilson said. "If these roads aren't HOA property and there's no legal authority to restrict access, then yeah, this could be false imprisonment. I'm going to talk to the HOA president." He drove to Patricia's house. I wasn't there for that conversation, but according to the deputy's report that came out later, Patricia insisted the HOA had authority over the roads and that she was protecting the community. She refused to remove the security or the signs. Deputy Wilson consulted with his supervisor and the county attorney's office. On February 23rd, Patricia Henshaw was arrested and charged with false imprisonment and abuse of authority. The neighborhood exploded with gossip and drama. Some people felt bad for Patricia, thinking we'd gone too far. But most residents, especially those who'd been harassed by the security guards, supported the action. Patricia bonded out the same day and immediately went on a social media rampage, posting long screeds on the community Facebook page about how she was being persecuted for trying to maintain community standards. The posts were unhinged, full of conspiracy theories about me somehow orchestrating a campaign to destroy the HOA. The board held an emergency meeting on February 25th and voted unanimously to remove Patricia as president. Doug took over as interim president, and his first act was to formally apologize to me and rescind all fines Patricia had issued. He also terminated the security company contract immediately. The criminal case moved forward. Patricia hired a defense attorney who tried to argue that she genuinely believed the HOA had authority over the roads, but the prosecutor wasn't having it. The evidence was clear that multiple people had told her the roads weren't HOA property, including her own board members, and she'd proceeded anyway. In late March, Patricia accepted a plea deal. She pled guilty to misdemeanor false imprisonment and was sentenced to 6 months probation, a $1,000 fine, and mandatory anger management counseling. She was also permanently banned from holding any HOA board position. The civil case settled shortly after. The HOA's insurance agreed to pay my legal fees, which totaled just under $20,000, and issued a formal letter acknowledging that I had done nothing wrong and that Patricia had abused her authority. Patricia put her house up for sale in April and moved out by June. According to the neighborhood gossip mill, she relocated to somewhere in Texas. I didn't ask for details. I was just glad she was gone. The private road situation resolved itself pretty smoothly. The road association I'd formed with the other affected residents became permanent. We drew up proper bylaws, elected Frank as president, and I continued maintaining the roads under contract. Everyone paid their annual fees without complaint. Doug turned out to be an excellent HOA president. He ran efficient meetings, enforced covenants reasonably and consistently, and never once bothered me about snow piles or anything else. The community settled back into peaceful mountain living. On a sunny Saturday morning in late July, I was out mowing my lawn when Frank pulled up with a case of craft beer and a grin. "Thought you might need this," he said, handing me a cold bottle. "You know, to celebrate surviving the HOA from hell." I laughed and accepted the beer. "I still can't believe how crazy that got." "You handled it perfectly, though," Frank said. "You stood your ground, protected your rights, and didn't back down from a bully." Patricia thought she could steamroll you, and instead she ended up with a criminal record. I just wanted to plow some roads, I said, shaking my head. All of this over snow piles. That's how it always starts with these HOA tyrants, Frank said. Some tiny perceived violation that they blow up into a crusade. You just happen to fight back instead of giving in. We sat on my deck, drinking beer and watching the afternoon clouds build over the mountains, promising another beautiful Colorado evening. Sarah came out and joined us, and soon Jennifer Martinez and her husband showed up, then a few other neighbors. Someone fired up my grill, and suddenly, we had an impromptu neighborhood party happening. As the sun set and the temperature dropped to that perfect mountain evening cool, I looked around at my neighbors, friends who'd supported me through months of harassment and legal stress. The roads we all used were in perfect condition, properly maintained and safe. The HOA was functioning the way it should, handling necessary community business without drama or power trips. It had cost me a year of stress, some sleepless nights, and a lot of aggravation, but I'd won. More importantly, I'd established that homeowners have rights that can't be trampled by petty tyrants with a title and an agenda. Patricia learned the hard way that you can't fine someone for helping their community, and you definitely can't imprison them for using roads they have legal rights to access. The legal system, for all its flaws and expense, had actually worked. Justice, slow and expensive, but genuine. I raised my beer bottle in a silent toast to standing your ground and knowing when to fight. Frank clinked his bottle against mine, understanding without words what we were acknowledging. The HOA had tried to fine me for snow removal methods, so I stopped maintaining their private access roads. And when they tried to punish me for that, they discovered that homeowners have rights, property law actually matters, and abuse of authority has consequences. Patricia spent 6 months on probation, and the rest of her life explaining that criminal record. I spent the next several years peacefully maintaining roads for neighbors who appreciated the work and paid fairly for the service. Some lessons cost $500 in baseless fines. Others cost your reputation, your position, and your freedom. Patricia learned hers the hard way, and our community was better for it. As darkness fell and the stars emerged over the Rocky Mountains, I felt grateful for stubborn independence, good neighbors, and a legal system that eventually sided with common sense over petty tyranny. The roads were clear, the HOA was sane, and Patricia Henshaw was somebody else's problem now. It doesn't get much better than that.